Hi, I'm Ken, and welcome to my channel Endurance Sweat, where it's all about training hard and having fun, whether it be on Zwift, Trainer Road, or in real life. This video is a comprehensive guide on how to choose frames and wheels when you're riding on Zwift. Before I get into it, I want to acknowledge that most of the material that I'm presenting today I've gleaned from Zwift Insider at zwiftinsider.com. Zwift Insider has a great deal of information, and you can see I've listed a number of the pages on Zwift Insider. Shopping guides, fastest bikes at each Zwift level, fastest climbing bikes, fastest bike frames and wheels for beginners, a complete list of Zwift bike frames, and so on. So after watching this video, you may want to visit zwiftinsider.com. It's a terrific resource. In this video, we'll be answering the question, does your choice of frame or wheel really make a difference? You see, there are about 80 frames and 30 wheel sets in the Zwift garage, each rated 1 to 4 stars based on coefficient of drag area and weight. And you'll see for mountain bikes, it's really about rolling resistance. There are basically 6 types of frames in Zwift. Aero frames, those frames that are really slippery in the wind. Climbing bikes, those lightweight bikes to get you up the Zwift and bend top. All-rounders for rolling courses. Then there are mountain bikes for gravel roads, and gravel bikes for gravel roads and mixed surface roads. And finally, time trial bikes. Special purpose when you're riding a time trial or you're riding solo. Your first consideration when choosing a frame and wheels is the type of terrain that you'll be riding on in Zwift. Is it a flat route like Tempest Fugit, or a climbing route like Alpe d'Huez? Perhaps you'll be riding on a rolling route like Titan's Grove, or a gravel route like Serpentine 8. That's probably going to be your primary determination on your selection of frame and wheels. Zwift Insider has tested all the frames and wheels. They've tested frames and wheels on flat courses, and the flat course consists of 2 loops of Tempest Fugit. And for climbing, the test involves riding up Alpe d'Huez. Their test is based on a 70-kilogram rider that is 183 centimeters tall and rides at 300 watts. That's a pretty powerful rider, riding at 4 watts per kilogram. There's not too many of us that can hold that type of power for that length of time. So the time differences quoted are probably not time differences that would apply necessarily to us. But on this slide, we're looking at some flat route results. On the left-hand side at the top is Zwift Insider's fastest bike for flat routes, the Cervelo S5 2020. And at the bottom is your standard Zwift carbon bike. It's the first bike that you'll get when you sign up on Zwift. And on the flat route, that is 2 laps of Tempest Fugit, the time differences between the Cervelo S5 2020 and the basic Zwift carbon bike is 18.5 seconds. Now on the right-hand side is Zwift's fastest wheel for flat routes, the DT Swiss Arc 1100 die-cut disc. And again, we're going to compare it to the basic wheel that you get when you first sign up on Zwift, the Zwift 32mm carbon wheel. And on the flat route of 2 laps of Tempest Fugit, the difference is 59.5 seconds. So overall, the difference between the best frame combined with the best wheel versus the basic Zwift carbon frame and basic Zwift carbon wheel is 78 seconds on 2 laps of Tempest Fugit. Now I think all of us would say, yeah, that's a worthwhile difference. Here are some other Aero frames and wheels worth considering. The Trek Madone, the Felt AR, the Focus Il Zalco Max, the Canyon Aero Road 2021, the Ridley Noah Fast, and the Zwift Aero. Some Aero wheels you might want to think about are the DT Swiss Arc 1100 die-cut 62, the Zip 808s, and the Envy SES 6.7. Now let's have a look at Zwift Insider's results for climbing bikes and wheels. The top-rated frame for climbing is the Specialized Athos S-Works. And again, comparing it to the standard Zwift carbon frame, the difference climbing Alpe d'Huez would be 57 seconds. Now the top-rated lightweight wheel is the Roval Alpinist CLX. Now to be honest, it's equivalent to the Millenstein lightweight wheel that you get at the spinner wheel at the top of the Zwift, but you have to get lucky to get the Millenstein wheel. Again, comparing it to Zwift's basic 32mm carbon wheel, the difference in climbing up the Zwift would be 16 seconds. So overall, comparing the top-rated frame and top-rated climbing wheel, comparing it to the basic Zwift carbon frame and wheels is 73 seconds. I guess we would say that, yes, that's worthwhile. But again, keep in mind, this is a rider riding at 4 watts per kilogram. So that difference probably wouldn't apply equally for those of us who can't put out nearly so much power. And some other climbing frames and wheels that you might want to have in your garage. The Cannondale EVO, the Bridgestone Anchor, the Specialized Tarmac Pro, and the Canyon Ultimate CFR. A couple of climbing wheels, a couple of recommended climbing wheels are the Zip 353 NSW and the Giant SLR Zero. Combining Zwift Insider's results for flat route, or 2 laps of Tempest Fugit, and climbing Alpe de Zwift, the best all-round frame and wheel combination would be the Scott Addict RC and the DT Zwift ARC 1100 die-cut 62. Now, I think most of you would know that the frames and wheels that you can buy in the Zwift drop shop are based on your current level. But don't despair. Even at levels 6 to 10 to 15, you can buy some pretty good frames and wheels that compare favorably to the best frames and wheels. There are big gains to be made at the lower levels, moving up from the basic Zwift carbon frame and basic Zwift 32mm carbon wheels. But as you get access to other frames and wheels at higher levels, the gains are only marginal. They become pretty small. Now, what about Zwift's Concept Z1 or Tron bike? How does it compare? Well, it's about the best-in-class aero bike. It compares very favorably to the best aero frames and aero wheels. It's only when you combine one of the best aero frames with a full rear disc wheel that those frames and wheel combinations marginally best the Concept or Tron bike. Now, surprisingly, the Tron bike is a poor climbing bike. I say surprising because you earn the Tron bike by climbing 50,000 meters in the Everesting Challenge. So you'd think that the Tron bike would be a good climber, but it isn't. Anyway, what I really want to say is you can't go wrong with the Tron bike on a flat or even on a rolling route on Zwift. I want to talk a moment about mountain bikes. Mountain bikes are the fastest on gravel. All the mountain bikes are only rated at 1 star for aero and 1 star for weight. But they are the fastest on gravel because they have low rolling resistance. Now, there aren't too many routes on Zwift that are completely gravel. I can think of Serpentine 8, for example, and it's a no-brainer that you should pick the mountain bike to start that route. But there are many other routes that have significant gravel portions. On those routes, it's almost always worthwhile to stop to change to a mountain bike for the gravel portion or the portion through the jungle. Now, there are also gravel bikes, and you would think the gravel bikes might be best on gravel, but it seems the mountain bikes are faster. You could choose a gravel bike for a mixed surface route, but from what I've read, they're rarely optimum. Time trial bikes. All the time trial bikes have 4 stars for aero. They're very slippery, but on the other hand, they're fairly heavy, only 1 star for weight. They are the best choice if you're doing a time trial. The only other circumstance where it's worth riding a time trial bike is on a flat course where you're doing a solo ride, for example on Tempest Fugit. But keep in mind, there is no draft on a time trial bike. So once you get on a time trial bike, you won't be getting any draft from other riders. Now, how do time trial bikes compare to road bikes? On the left-hand side of the slide, on the top is the Zwift time trial bike, and at the bottom is the Zwift standard carbon bike. Again, in Zwift Insider's test, with a 75 kilogram rider, 183 centimeters tall, riding at 300 watts, the difference in time riding 2 laps of Tempest Fugit between the Zwift time trial bike and the Zwift carbon bike was 80 seconds. Now keep in mind, that's the Zwift carbon bike with no drafting. So if you were riding Tempest Fugit and you were drafting, you probably could close that gap down very considerably, if not eliminated entirely. And on the right-hand side, how do the time trial bikes compare? Well, between Zwift Insider's top-rated time trial bike, the Canyon Speedmax CF SLS Disc, and the basic Zwift time trial bike, again, for 2 laps of Tempest Fugit, the difference was 35 seconds. Now, there is one other category of frame on Zwift that I wanted to talk about, and I call these novelty frames. And they include the Zwift Buffalo Farad, the Zwift Safety, and the Zwift Steel Bike. None of these are the fastest. As you can see, the Buffalo bike is 1 star for aero and 1 star for weight. The Zwift Safety, 2 stars for aero and 2 stars for weight. And the Steel, 1 star for aero and 2 stars for weight. So they aren't nearly the fastest bike, but they do make a statement when you're riding on Zwift. Now, for all the analysis of frames, how aero they are and how lightweight they are, sometimes your choice of bike to ride on Zwift comes down to, well, you want to ride the frame and wheels that you ride in real life. So for example, I have a Giant TCR, so often you'll find me on Zwift on the Giant TCR. Or perhaps you have a dream bike that you'd like. You can't afford it in real life, but you can afford it in the drop shop. Similarly, you might have a favorite team bike that you want to ride. Perhaps Tadej Pogacar's Colnago that he's won 2 Tour de France's on. So you can look at all the numbers, but sometimes it just comes down to, well, I want to ride the same frame and wheels that I ride in real life. Or I want to ride that dream bike. Now, I've been talking about all these frames and wheels on Zwift, but the most important frame is the one on your trainer. Make sure it's properly set up, that the drivetrain on your bike is clean and lubed, that the shifting is set up properly, that it's smooth shifting, and that you can shift to the full range of your gears. For those with wheel-on trainers, make sure the tire pressure is set correctly. And with all that sweat dripping down on our frames, make sure you keep your frame and components clean. And for your trainer, calibrate it regularly if that's what your trainer requires. Make sure your sensors, your speed sensors, your cadence sensors, and your smart bike are reliably connected to your computer. And on Zwift, adjust the trainer difficulty setting. You don't want to be spinning out on mild declines, and at the same time, you don't want to get bogged down on those steep inclines. And that might depend on whether your bike on your trainer has a standard, mid, or compact crankset. So after all this, keep in mind that the most important frame is the one on your trainer. To summarize, there are 6 basic types of frames on Zwift. Aero frames. If you're picking an aero frame, it should have at least 3 stars. 4 stars are reserved for time trial bikes. If you'll be climbing Alpe d'Huez or Ventop, Lucher, or even Epic KOM, look for a lightweight bike with 4 stars. If you want an all-round bike, probably should pick one with both 3 stars for aero and 3 stars for weight as a minimum. Mountain bikes only have 1 star for aero and weight, but again, they're the preferred bike whenever you're riding, doing any significant amount of riding on gravel roads. Gravel bikes, 2 stars aero and 2 stars weight, another option to mountain bikes. And then time trial bikes, for when you're doing a time trial or you're riding solo on a flat course and won't be drafting. They all have 4 stars. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and click on the notification bell. It really helps the channel. Okay, that's all about frames and wheels. Again, check out ZwiftInsider.com. Till next time, train hard and have fun.